I am Melissa White, 31 years old, and until 1 week ago, I was the beautiful eldest daughter who always did what was expected. Then my parents demanded I empty my life savings of $80,000 for my brother Raymond's startup. When I refused, their words cut deep. How dare you refuse to help your brother? You have always been selfish. I did not argue. I simply walked away. This morning, I finally turned on my phone to find 7 urgent calls waiting. If you are watching this now, tell me in the comments your country. And hit like and subscribe for more family stories that will make you question your own. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood on the west side of San Antonio, I learned early that being the oldest daughter meant one thing: responsibility. Mom came home with ink-smudged fingers and stories about shy 4th graders who bloomed when someone finally listened. Dad's boots landed by the front door with a thud that meant he'd made it through another shift. If there was a family motto, it was, "Dear duty and don't make a fuss." From the time I could reach the sink, I was the reliable older sister. I loaded the dishwasher while multiplication tables ran through my head, learned to time spaghetti so it wouldn't clump, folded towels the hotel way, and kept Raymond's permission slips in a folder because he always lost them. On Saturdays, Mom tutored kids who couldn't afford lessons, and Dad picked up overtime, so I became the stand-in adult, 3 o'clock snack, homework patrol, shin guard finder before practice. I didn't resent it at first. It felt like air, necessary, invisible, unquestioned. Raymond glowed under a different sun. He was the golden child, the kid with grass-stained knees, and a parade of coaches shaking Dad's hand. Mom's lesson plans turned into travel itineraries for out-of-town games. Dad's overtime bought cleats with his name stitched on the heel. There were pep rallies, team photos, and a framed jersey that lived in our hallway like a shrine. When he missed curfew, it was because he needs to blow off steam. When I missed a single assignment, it was, "Melissa, we expect better from you." My 16th birthday slipped past the way a bus does when you're waving from the curb. There was no cake, no candles, only a text from Mom. "We'll celebrate when we get back. Big tournament in Austin. Be proud of your brother." I microwaved a burrito, stuck a tea light in it as a joke, and did my chemistry notes at the kitchen table. Raymond scored 2 goals that weekend. Dad posted the final scoreboard with 10 exclamation points. I liked it and finished cleaning the stovetop before bed. I learned early to make myself useful and small. I color-coded our calendar, packed Raymond's tournament bag, and wrote chore charts that mostly applied to me. If I asked for help, it was met with a sigh or later, "sweetie," which meant never. On parent night, teachers told my parents I was responsible. Coaches told them Raymond had potential. Guess which story got replayed over dinner? San Antonio itself became a map of who we each were. HB for groceries I put away, the dusty soccer complex where I kept score on a clipboard, the library where I finished essays under humming fluorescent lights while Dad napped between shifts. Fiesta parades with confetti stuck in Raymond's hair while I held our place on the curb and passed out water bottles. I knew which bus route got me home fastest so I could start dinner before everyone arrived and wondered why it wasn't already done. When I said I wanted journalism, Mom smiled with teacherly patience, but Dad's answer dropped like a gavel. "Journalists starve. Be practical. Accounting is more reliable." He wasn't cruel. He was certain. Reliability was the family religion, and I was its most faithful congregant. So I tucked away the notebook where I kept quotes I loved, swapped newsprint for spreadsheets, and told myself that budgets were just another kind of story, columns and rows instead of characters and scenes. The irony is that I wrote constantly. I drafted apology texts for Raymond when he forgot to respond to a coach, drafted emails to teachers when he missed an assignment after an away game, drafted excuses to myself for why journalism could wait. I edited us into a functional family and pretended the red marks didn't sting. Holidays exposed the seams. Christmas morning, Raymond unwrapped a new phone and a limited edition ball. "I got a calculator for your future." At Easter, the pastor praised service. Afterward, my mother reminded me to clear the dishes so we could make Raymond's practice on time. On the 4th of July, Dad grilled burgers while explaining compound interest to me and shouting, "Attaboy," when Raymond sunk a frisbee shot. Love wasn't absent, it was weighted. There were small rebellions I barely registered as such. I'd linger in the school newspaper room under the pretense of helping staple pages, breathing in the ink. I kept a folder of articles printed from the Express News, investigations, profiles that made ordinary people glow, and tucked it under my bed like contraband. Once, Mrs. Ortiz, the advisor, told me I had a reporter's spine. I went home floating and, after dinner, color-coded the pantry. If Raymond felt the tilt, he never said. He was kind in the easy way of someone accustomed to being carried. "You're the best, Mel," he'd say when I found his ID, when I iced his ankle, when I drove him to practice because Dad's shift ran over. I believed him. I believed duty meant love, that reliability would be noticed eventually, that one day someone would turn to me and say, "Your dream matters, too." The night I brought up journalism for the last time, Dad was lacing his boots for a night call. The TV murmured weather alerts. Mom graded spelling tests at the coffee table. "I got into Texas State's journalism program," I said, heart-pounding. Dad didn't look up. "Melissa, most journalists are poor, and you know it." Mom added softly, "Your father just wants you safe." The word safe slid over me like a heavy blanket. I nodded, cleared the mugs, and opened my laptop to research accounting programs. By senior year, the roles were cemented. I was the girl who did what needed doing. Raymond was the boy whose future the city seemed to lean toward. Sometimes, late at night, I'd stand in the backyard and listen to the trains, imagining my life tracked to a different line, no chore chart, no schedules, just a beat reporter with tired shoes and a notebook full of names. Then the porch light would flick on, and I'd go inside to set the coffee pot for Dad's dawn shift and lay out Raymond's uniform to dry. I don't tell this to accuse my parents of not loving me. They loved in the language they knew. Steady work, paid bills, hot meals, hands clapped loudest for the most visible win. I was fluent in that language, too. I just learned an accent no one heard. By the time I left for college, I could balance a checkbook in my sleep, triage a crisis with a list and a pen, and smile through the ache of a birthday forgotten in a stadium's shadow. Working my way through college felt like dragging a backpack filled with bricks uphill every single day. While other students decorated their dorm rooms with fairy lights and posters, I carried trays of greasy burgers and refilled endless cups of soda, earning $2.13 an hour plus tips at a diner off the highway. Waitressing wasn't glamorous, but it was the only way to cover the pieces of tuition and rent that my loans didn't. I remember counting singles and quarters at night, folding them neatly into envelopes labeled books, utilities, and bus pass, terrified that if I lost track of even $1, everything would collapse. I wasn't naive. I knew my parents couldn't afford to pay my tuition in full, but I had assumed, in the hopeful way only an 18-year-old can, that some corner of my childhood sacrifices would finally be acknowledged. That's why the day I learned about my grandmother's education fund hit like a punch to the stomach. She had saved for me quietly, faithfully, putting money aside so that when I turned 18, I could chase my dream without drowning in debt. The account existed. It had my name on it. But when I asked, confused, why it wasn't there, my mother's lips pressed thin and my father muttered, "We had to use it for Raymond. His training. His trips. You'll manage, you're the responsible one." It was the first time I felt robbed not by strangers, but by the very people who told me family meant everything. I didn't scream. I didn't slam doors. I just nodded and went back to my shift at the diner that night, carrying plates with a smile so tight my cheeks hurt. College was survival. I learned to brew coffee strong enough to keep me awake through double shifts and statistics lectures. I typed essays at the library until closing, then dragged myself to the bus stop with a styrofoam cup of soup from work clutched in my hand. My wardrobe was thrift store black pants and white blouses that always smelled faintly of fryer oil, no matter how many times I washed them. While my classmates joined sororities or planned spring break trips, I kept spreadsheets of interest rates on my student loans, trying to calculate how many years of my life they would steal. Raymond, meanwhile, drifted through his college experience as if it were a vacation package someone else had bought for him. He switched majors 3 times, spent weekends at soccer tournaments or parties, and came home with laundry bags that mom washed without complaint. When he failed a class, it was shrugged off. He just hasn't found his calling yet. When I pulled an all-nighter to ace an exam, the reaction was lukewarm. Of course Melissa did well. She's the studious one. I envied how lightly his mistakes landed. A failed course was a funny anecdote at dinner. My smallest misstep felt like proof that I wasn't as reliable as everyone believed. But that weight kept me moving, grinding, never daring to pause. There were moments of almost joy. The day I got an A on my advanced accounting project, I bought myself a slice of cheesecake from the diner and ate it slowly in the staff locker room, savoring each bite like it was proof I could carve out something sweet for myself. Once, my manager slipped me an extra $20 in tips after I covered for a sick coworker. I used it to buy a secondhand copy of a journalism textbook just to remember the dream I'd buried under ledgers and balance sheets. Graduation day came with a cap, gown, and a quiet pride that felt almost dangerous to admit. I walked across the stage, diploma in hand, graduating with honors in accounting. No one in the audience held a handmade sign with my name, but I knew what I had survived. My loans still shadowed me, but I had done it on my own terms, with blistered feet and calloused hands from trays heavier than they looked. Raymond barely made it through. He showed up late to his own commencement, I ask you, grinning for pictures he hadn't earned. When his name was called, my parents clapped until their palms turned red. He just needed time to figure things out, Mom whispered, eyes shining. Dad laughed and added, he'll find his path. You'll see. And no one said those things about me. For me, the unspoken line was, Melissa will be fine. Melissa doesn't need praise. And maybe that was true, but God, sometimes I wanted it anyway. When I stepping off the graduation stage and into adulthood already carrying debt, resentment, and a skill set in spreadsheets, I tucked my journalism dream deeper into the drawer of someday, smiled for the photos beside Raymond in his wrinkled gown. By the time I turned 27, the shape of my life looked very different from that of most people my age. I had clawed my way into a stable job as a financial analyst in Houston, working long hours at a mid-sized firm where the fluorescent lights buzzed past 9 most nights. My title sounded more glamorous than it felt, but to me, it was proof that all those endless shifts at the diner, all those nights when I fell asleep at my desk with a calculator still in my hand, had finally led somewhere. Still, I didn't celebrate the way others might have. There were no champagne toasts or splurges on handbags when my first real salary came in. Instead, I opened a savings account and named it Dream Home. Every month, I transferred a fixed percentage of my paycheck there, as though it were a tithe to a future I believed in with religious devotion. I lived like a minimalist before minimalism was a trend. My apartment was a 1-bedroom on the edge of the city, with walls the color of wet concrete and a kitchen counter so chipped it could have told stories from decades past. My furniture came from Craigslist, my dishes from Goodwill, and my wardrobe was a rotation of plain slacks and cardigans that passed office inspection. I didn't mind. Every dollar I didn't spend was another brick in the foundation of the house I imagined for myself, a small, sunlit place with my name on the deed, where no one could tell me it wasn't mine. Meanwhile, my friends lived as though adulthood was just an extended summer vacation. At brunch, they swapped stories of trips to Bali, Spain, or Cancun, their phones filled with filtered photos of infinity pools and neon cocktails. I listened politely, smiled at the right places, and stirred my black coffee, calculating in my head how much one of those trips cost in terms of square footage I could be adding to my future home. They teased me sometimes, called me grandma for going to bed early before a big client meeting, or Miss Spreadsheet when I declined a night out. I laughed with them, but a small voice inside reminded me I wasn't saving for Bali. I was saving for freedom. Work became my second home, and Excel my closest confidant. I tracked not just client data, but every penny of my personal expenses. I knew the exact cost of my weekly groceries, the average fluctuation in my utility bills, and how much interest I was losing by letting a small amount sit in checking instead of moving it into a higher yield account. My boss joked once that I probably had a spreadsheet tracking my sleep hours. He wasn't entirely wrong. I had a document that logged my caffeine intake and study sessions for professional certifications. I didn't see it as obsession. I saw it as survival. Because I had lived too long at the mercy of other people's priorities. Sometimes, though, the loneliness crept in. On Saturday mornings, when I made coffee in my tiny kitchen, I'd scroll through social media and see couples posting photos from their new homes, friends clinking glasses at rooftop bars, families gathered for birthdays I hadn't been invited to. My parents rarely called unless it was about Raymond's latest endeavor, and even then, I was expected to cheer from the sidelines, not share my own news. But when I felt the ache of isolation strongest, I'd open my dream home account online and stare at the growing number. The balance was my silent companion, my proof that all the sacrifices weren't in vain. I pictured the house in vivid detail. A modest two-story with a front porch big enough for a rocking chair, a small backyard where I could grow tomatoes in the summer, and a kitchen bright enough to make cooking feel less like a chore. A place with quiet walls, where no one would barge in with accusations or demands, where I could finally exhale. There were temptations, of course. Colleagues bought new cars when bonuses came in. I kept driving my second-hand Corolla that rattled whenever the AC was on. And once, I almost caved when a coworker invited me on a group trip to Hawaii. The thought of warm sand and ocean air almost broke me. But then I logged into my savings account and realized the cost of that week-long escape was equal to 2 months of my careful deposits. I declined politely, telling them I had too much work. People sometimes asked me why I didn't just date seriously, settle down, and buy a home with someone else. But to me, partnership had always looked like compromise, like shrinking so someone else could expand. I didn't want a house that came with strings attached. I wanted to know that I could stand entirely on my own. Love might come later. First, I needed proof that I could build something without anyone else's approval. The dinner announced itself hours before anyone sat down. I could tell by the way my mother moved through the kitchen, measured, ceremonial, like she was staging a photo for a magazine. The good tablecloth came out of the hall closet, the one she kept wrapped in tissue. She polished the family silverware with a soft cloth until she could see her reflection in each spoon, muttering about fingerprints like they were moral failings. My father came home freshly shaved, hair slicked, and for the first time in months put on a tie. He didn't wear one for birthdays anymore, not even mine. But tonight? Tonight, apparently, required reverence. Raymond arrived last, late as always, radiating an energy that demanded applause before he'd done anything. He carried a slim briefcase and a cardboard box of glossy folders stamped with a black and red logo, robo-sushi, the letters stylized like neon over a conveyor belt. He dropped the box on the dining room chair like a magician's prop and kissed Mom's cheek. She beamed the way she used to when he brought home participation trophies. "Ready?" he asked, already opening his case. "We are so ready," my father replied, and patted the chair at the head of the table as if Raymond were the guest of honor at a gala. I set the salad down and said nothing, watching Mom place the silver forks just so, left of the plates, water glasses marching in a line. She put out soy sauce dishes even though we were having roast chicken, the first of many details that felt off but were going to be ignored in service of the evening's theme. We ate in a performative hush, my parents trading glances like conspirators who knew the ending of a movie and wanted to hurry me through the boring part. As soon as plates were cleared, Raymond sprang up, passed around the glossy folders, and dimmed the lights. "Imagine the restaurants of the future," he said, sweeping his arm like a host revealing a prize on a game show, where everything is done by robots. The first page of his packet was a full-bleed image, a stainless steel bar with smiling faceless machines carrying perfect nigiri. The second page was a sketch of a dining room, sleek booths, glowing panels, something that looked like a drone hovering above a table. My stomach tightened the way it does before a storm. I turned the page and found more pictures. Not numbers, not contracts, not even a timeline, just glossy optimism and captions promising efficiency and wow factor. Raymond paced as he talked. "We'll start with a flagship in Houston," he said. "Then Austin, Dallas, and within 2 years, we'll roll out franchising. Our robots won't just deliver food, they'll prep, They'll plate. They'll entertain. Think McDonald's, but smarter. We'll overtake them within 5 years. He said overtake McDonald's like he was ordering fries. My father nodded vigorously. Mom clasped her hands. I felt heat creep up my neck. Do you have supplier contracts? I asked as evenly as I could. Sushi-grade fish isn't exactly something you order like printer paper and prices swing. What about food safety? Robot maintenance? Insurance? Noise levels? Permits? He waved a hand as if I'd asked when the napkins would arrive. We've got leads, he said. A guy in California, a guy in New York. The tech is basically plug and play. It's just about vision. Financial projections? I flipped to the back and found a page titled Revenue Streams with bullet points like merch, VIP robot shows, and brand partnerships. No costs. No break-even analysis. No capital expenditure line. We'll be fine, Dad interjected, voice sharpening. Your brother has a brilliant idea. People laughed at innovators before. Family supports dreams. Mom pushed a dish of lemon slices toward me like a peace offering. We've already done our part, she said carefully, eyes sliding to Raymond, then back to me. The house, well, we took a small mortgage, just a portion. Your father believes in this. Believes? I repeated. The word tasted like tin. How much? Dad straightened his tie. 40,000. It's nothing we can't handle. And it's time you got involved, too. He took a breath, then looked at me as if he were doing me a favor. 80,000 from you to start. It's an investment, Melissa. A family venture. You'll be proud one day to say you backed it at the beginning. My mouth went dry. 80,000 wasn't a number to me. It was years of lunches packed from home, second-hand couches, skipped vacations, early mornings, and late nights. I closed the folder and set it down gently as if it might explode. Let's talk about risk, I said, because I am who I am. Robotics in a food service environment means high capital costs, specialized technicians, and downtime risk if anything breaks. Sushi means perishables, variable suppliers, and tight health codes. Labor savings are offset by maintenance and insurance. What's the plan for cash flow if the opening is slow? Have you priced comparable leases? Location matters more than concept. Raymond's smile faltered, then reassembled. You always find the dark cloud, he joked, but it didn't quite land. This is about being first. Buzz. Press. People will line up for this. People line up for one night, I said quietly. Then they go back to what's reliable. My father's chair scraped the floor as he leaned forward. Don't look for problems where there aren't any, he snapped, the warmth gone from his voice. Family supports dreams. I looked at him, at the polished silver catching the low light, at my mother's anxious hands smoothing the tablecloth, at the folder promising a future that wasn't mine. Isn't my dream of a house important? I asked, and I heard the smallness in my voice. Silence, then the thud of the judgment I knew was coming. Dad's face hardened into something unfamiliar. You've always been selfish, he said, each word clipped, like a door shutting. Always thinking about yourself. Your brother wants to build something big for this family, and you're counting pennies. Mom flinched, but said nothing. Raymond, suddenly very interested in rearranging his papers, didn't look up. I swallowed and stood to collect the plates, a reflex I couldn't turn off even then. My mother rose too, reaching to take a dish from my hands, her fingers brushing mine, soft with apology that never formed into words. You'll see, Dad said, settling back, satisfied now that a verdict had been delivered. You'll thank us later. Raymond cleared his throat. There's a page in the packet about the mascot robots, he offered, overly bright. They'll dance on weekends. I stared at the silver fork in my hand and wondered, absurdly, how many houses it had seen us dream about, argue in, forgive in. I set it gently into the sink, turned off the water, and dried my hands. Then I returned to the table, slid the robo-sushi folder back across the wood toward my brother, and spoke in the calm voice I use when I know the ground is about to shift. I'm not investing, I said. Not now. Not with what you've shown me. Dad's chair creaked again. Melissa. I'm not investing, I repeated, softer, because rage had nowhere to go in that room and would only be used against me. My dream is a home. My own roof. My own life. That is my project." He exhaled through his nose, a sound of dismissal. "Selfish as always," he said again, as if naming me could make me into something else. And maybe it did. Because after the dishes were done, after the folders were packed and the logo had been tucked away, after my mother kissed my cheek with a tremble, I sat alone at the table for a while, staring at the emptied bowls and the ghost of a family meal. I opened my phone, scrolled to my savings app, and looked at the balance that represented every yes I had denied myself. Outside, the streetlight washed the lawn in pale yellow. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked. I picked up my coat from the chair, slipped it on, and let myself out quietly, the door clicking shut behind me like a period at the end of a sentence no one else wanted to read. I left home silently. Folded the robo-sushi folder once, slid it into the trash under the sink, and packed an overnight bag with the same calm I used to balance budgets. Toothbrush. 2 blouses. The notebook I hadn't dared open in years. I texted my mother that I'd stay with a coworker and drove into the night, letting the radio fill the places where apology might have lived. A week later, I applied for a transfer to our company's Denver branch. I filled out the form at my desk during lunch, hands steady, as if I were authorizing a routine expense. HR replied the next morning. There was an opening on a team that handled small business portfolios in Colorado. Lateral move, comparable salary, the email read. Start date in 2 weeks if you can manage it. I stared at the screen long enough to feel my ribs lift and drop. Then I typed yes. I rented a small apartment west of downtown, the kind with a view of brick alleys and sky. The floor creaked in a friendly way, the oven ran hot, and the windows, even when closed, carried the smell of coffee from the cafe downstairs. I bought only what I needed: a mattress, a table that could pass for a desk, a lamp that made the room look like morning even at night. The first evening, I lay on the floor and listened to the building breathe, the hum of someone's blender, the muffled laugh of strangers, the wind threading itself through the alley. My chest felt light for the first time since, maybe ever. There was no family calendar on the fridge, no shrine to someone else's potential. Just my name on the lease and quiet. At work, the air was different too. The Denver office felt scrappier, less impressed with itself. People biked in. Managers left at a reasonable hour. My new team lead, Priya, shook my hand and asked what parts of analysis actually gave me joy. I said, half a joke, telling the story of numbers. She nodded like that was a real job. And then I started writing again. Not the ledger-clean sentences I'd used to negotiate budgets, but the kind that noticed people. I pitched a short piece to a local site about how seasonal workers stretch paychecks between ski seasons, and the editor wrote back the same day, "Can you file by Friday?" I covered a taco stand that accepted IOUs from regulars during slow weeks. I interviewed a widower who ran a snow shovel crew with guys in recovery, paying daily so no one had to choose between rent and a relapse. Finance, yes, but the kind you can feel in your hands. The stories ran with my byline, plain and small, and strangers commented things like, "This is my neighborhood, and I know this guy." Each time, it felt like finding a skylight in a house I thought had no windows. Weekends, I signed up for mountaineering courses because a flyer in the lobby said no experience necessary, and for once I believed it. The first class met in a gear shop that smelled like rubber and pine. We learned to tie knots with rope that burned our palms and practiced self-arrest on a slope of dirty spring snow while the instructor yelled, "Trust your edges." The group was a messy stack of lives, nurses, bartenders, a retiree who had decided the mountain was kinder than his HOA. Nobody knew me beyond Melissa. No one asked what my brother did or why I looked tired when fall sports season started. On the trail, breathing hard above the tree line, I felt the old noise drain out through the soles of my boots. Denver made room where Houston had only made lists. I swapped the fluorescent supermarket for the Saturday farmers market and learned the names of the women who sold me eggs and honey. I bought a secondhand parka from a woman who tucked a note in the pocket for summit days. I kept writing, sometimes at the cafe downstairs, sometimes at my kitchen table with the window cracked to let in the cool, thin air that felt like permission. One afternoon, an acquaintance from a networking night emailed me a link. A small consulting firm on Colfax was hiring. They specialized in helping women start tiny, resilient businesses, mobile bakeries, childcare co-ops, bookkeeping for artisans, nothing flashy, everything durable. "You're perfect for this," she wrote. I clicked through their site. Photos of clients at folding tables with laptops open, a page of wins that looked less like headlines and more like rent paid on time. I sent a resume and clips from my local articles, thinking it was a long shot. The founder replied the next day, "Interview on Wednesday?" I spent the night before the interview editing my writing samples and ironing a blouse that still smelled faintly of the Houston office. The next morning, the sky was the color of clean paper. In the lobby, a poster read, "Small is not small. Small is specific." I waited with my hands folded, watching a woman in a purple scarf explain cash flow to a baker using wooden blocks as stand-ins for expenses. When the founder, Lila, shook my hand, she didn't ask about prestige. She asked what I wanted to build. I heard myself answer without flinching, a bridge. From numbers to lives. 2 weeks later, I turned my phone back on. It buzzed to life on the kitchen table like a trapped bee, lighting up with a wall of red notifications. 7 missed calls. 7 voicemails. For a minute, I just stared, the way you stare at a door you're not ready to open. The old life had broken through my quiet like a leak. I made tea I didn't drink and pressed play. First voicemail. "Dad, the voice I know best when it's sure of itself, so this is how it is now? You abandon us, and because of you the investors are having doubts. They ask where the family stands, and I have to say my own daughter walked out. Well done, Melissa." He hung up hard. Even in a recording, I heard the slap of his certainty. Second voicemail. "Mom, brittle sweet. Honey, you didn't think how this looks. People talk. You know how Houston is. Your father is trying so hard for your brother. Just call back, okay? Please." Her breath snagged on that last word like a thread. I pressed pause and looked at my hands. They were steady, the way they'd been on the glacier-scraped slope last weekend when the instructor yelled, "Trust your edges." So I pressed play again. Third voicemail. Unknown number, then Raymond's voice pouring out fast. "Investors backed off after you left the dinner. They said they wanted a united front. I told them you were just being dramatic. I didn't mean that. Call me." He sounded like he was running, like if he could make it to the end of a sentence the ground might stop dropping under him. The fourth voicemail arrived an hour after the third, same day, later in the evening. "Dad again," the edge sharpened. "You left us with the bill, Melissa. We mortgaged the house for his restaurant, and now, thanks to your little scene, everyone's spooked. Do you understand what you've done?" The fiction of causality was so tidy you could frame it. Fifth voicemail. Mom, crying this time, her words tumbling. "Your dad is in the hospital. They think it's stress. He won't rest, he keeps making calls, and the bank is threatening us. Melissa, please, we are in danger of losing everything." Behind her I could hear the hospital monitors, their metronome beeping through the apology she could not say. I slid down the cabinet and sat on the floor, the phone warm in my palm. I wanted to be harder than this, but grief is a muscle you don't realize you've built until it lifts you. The kettle clicked off. I didn't move. Sixth voicemail. Raymond, voice wrecked. "I lost all my partners. They said the numbers didn't make sense and the robots were a gimmick. You were right. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do." Silence after the apology, like a room emptied too quickly. I thought of the folder sliding across the table, the word selfish landing like a stamp on my forehead. I thought of my dream home balance and the way my chest had opened in the Denver air. Both truths could live here, their fear and my boundary. I pressed play on the last one. It was Dad again, but quieter now, tired around the edges. "Your mother says I should ask, so I'm asking. We need help. The bank moved our payment up. The investor wants out of the bridge loan, and your brother, well, your brother is learning a hard lesson. Family supports dreams, right?" That's what I said. Maybe I was talking to myself. He paused, then, almost embarrassed, added, "Please, call your mother." I put the phone face down and listened to the building breathe, the blender upstairs, a hallway door, someone laughing near the stairwell. I pictured my father in a hospital bed pretending not to be scared, and Raymond alone at a table somewhere with a stack of papers that still weren't numbers. I washed the cup I hadn't used. The hot water steamed my face. On the counter lay a crumpled list I'd written the day I moved in. Grocery staples, local clinics, bus routes, a scribble that said, article, snow shovel crew follow-up. My life here was small and honest. Then I pressed the phone awake again and scrolled through the voicemails. For a moment, I almost hit call back without a plan, just to hear Mom's voice. Instead, I rewound them all, listening like an auditor. The shifts in tone, the changing stakes, the moment each person realized their power didn't work on me from a distance. I heard, too, the parts they couldn't say out loud: fear, pride curdling into panic, a son trying to become a man with cardboard and slogans. Son slid across the floor toward my shoes. I opened the window to the alley. The air was thinner here, but it carried farther. When the dishes were done, I took one last look at the notifications on my phone, red numbers glowing like a warning light. I put the phone on the table, let my pulse settle, and opened my laptop the way I open a spreadsheet. First, information. I messaged 2 friends from Houston who worked at different banks, people who had seen me grind through entry-level analysis and knew I wouldn't waste their time. I wrote, hypothetical, primary residence, partial cash-out refi for a risky venture, now borrower facing payment acceleration plus investor exiting. Options. They called me back within an hour. Their voices had that measured steadiness bankers use when a storm has already made landfall. The situation was ugly: bridge money, sloppy paperwork, variable rate exposure tied to a market spikes, but the house wasn't gone yet. It's salvageable if someone competent runs point, my friend Nadia said. Not if they keep improvising. The second friend, Evan, texted a list: loss mitigation, rate buy down, term extension, hardship affidavit, forbearance window, 30 to 90 days max, show capacity plus plan. Translation: breathe, show the bank a path, and do it yesterday. Next, protection. I emailed a lawyer in Denver I'd met through the local articles. She specialized in small business and family assets, the kind of attorney who explains consequences without theatrics. I also reached out to a financial advisor I trusted, a woman who runs numbers like a marathoner. Steady pace, finish line in sight. We set a joint online meeting for the following week. 8 days felt far away, and also like a deadline I could live with. I called my parents that evening. My mother answered on the first ring, voice raw from crying. I kept mine even. I've spoken to people, I said. It's bad, but not final. I could hear my father in the background, television muted, the scrape of his chair as he leaned closer. We need a plan, I said, and ground rules. My mother said yes to everything the way someone says yes while bracing for more pain. My father said nothing, which was new, and told me he had finally met a wall louder than a certainty. I spent the next 3 days assembling the kind of packet I used to build for clients who didn't know what they didn't know. I made a 1-page overview: to preserve primary residence, mitigate default, unwind predatory bridge. I listed assets, liabilities, due dates, worst-case triggers, and a timeline that would make an underwriter nod. The online meeting arrived on a Wednesday mid-morning. My lawyer's square lit up first: Elena, hair pulled back, eyes clear, background blurred. Then the advisor, Grace, with a notepad and a pen she actually used. Then my parents, side by side on their couch. And finally Raymond, last, face puffy from not sleeping. The robo-sushi logo peeking from a binder I wished I could set on fire with a look. I felt the old ache rise, years of being the oxygen everyone forgot to thank, and then I did what I came to do. I have a path, I said. It is narrow and it is conditional. No one interrupted. I shared my screen. First slide: the mortgage terms, the bridge loan, the investor's exit clause. Elena confirmed the legal exposure, calm as a surgeon. Second slide: the bank's likely appetite, what they would accept, what they would never accept. Grace outlined the cash flow if we stopped the bleeding now versus in 60 days. Third slide: my offer. Loan restructuring, I said, with a hardship affidavit and a term extension. A small rate buy down if they'll take it. I will provide a personal loan to cover the arrears and initial fees, but only officially and only through contract. I paused, then read the terms, clean and slow, so they could not pretend later that they had misheard. 1. A notarized loan agreement from me to you, with a schedule and mandatory repayment. Not a gift. Not a heroic sister move. A loan with interest that matches what my own savings would have earned. 2. Raymond will work and participate in payments. Documented employment. Direct deposit into the payment account. No side deals, no cash slipping through fingers, no robot mascots to be financed while the house is in triage. 3. Recognition in written form that my life and my goals are no less valuable than Raymond's dreams. You will sign it. You will not ask me for money outside the terms of this loan. Words matter when they're on paper. 4. Family therapy. Non-negotiable. Weekly for at least 3 months. We are not just fixing numbers. We are fixing the way you talk to me, about me, and around me. I stopped sharing the screen and looked at them. Not at the ground, not at the corner of the camera where people look when they want to disappear. At them. My mother cried first, the quiet kind that makes you want to hand someone a glass of water. I can do therapy, she whispered, almost to herself. My father's jaw worked, the old machinery of pride and fear grinding against each other. A contract, he said finally, like the word tasted wrong in his mouth. Between family? Especially between family, Elena said, her voice gentle but iron. It protects love from money. Raymond leaned forward until his face filled the screen. I'll get a job, he said quickly. Anything. He swallowed. I'll pay you back, Mel. Grace slid in smoothly. We'll set up a dedicated account with auto-pay and view-only access for Melissa and the attorney, she said. Transparency keeps people honest and reduces holiday fights. She smiled at her own gallows humor and somehow made it sound like a kindness. We went line by line through the plan. Elena highlighted where my loan sat in repayment order. Grace ran scenarios, best case, worst case, boring case. I answered questions like a consultant, not a daughter trying to be good enough. When my father said, "This interest feels impersonal," I replied, "It is standard. Impersonal is how we keep this from becoming personal poison." When my mother asked whether therapy could be every other week, I said, weekly. We have decades to unwind. When Raymond asked if he could keep working on the restaurant in the margins, I said, you can learn in the margins. You can repay in the margins. You cannot borrow from them. At the end, there was a long silence that for once didn't terrify me. My term sat on the table between us like a third chair at dinner, the kind that changes the way people reach for the salt. Finally, my father nodded, a small, careful motion I'd never seen on his face. We agree, he said. The words landed in me like warm stones, strange and heavy and real. Say it precisely, Elena prompted, eyes kind. My father glanced at her, then at me. We agree to the plan, he repeated harder. We agree to the loan with repayment. We agree to therapy. My mother reached for his hand like she was grateful to have found it. Then we'll begin, I said, and I meant all 4 words. The logistics unfolded the way rescue always does, the boring parts first. Elena drafted the promissory note and the security agreement tied to nothing, but their signatures, no liens on my future, only consequences for default that would be spelled out. Grace prepared the hardship letter for the bank, carved clean of excuses and full of plan. Nadia texted the contact for loss mitigation with a heads up that a package would arrive by Friday from a borrower, who finally has an adult in the room. I suppressed the urge to apologize for needing that line. That night, I printed the draft agreement and laid it on my kitchen table. The paper looked not ordinary. The next morning, my mother sent a text, "Therapist near us, covered by insurance, Wednesdays at 6. Okay. I typed back, okay. An hour later, Raymond emailed a screenshot of a job application to a cybersecurity help desk role and asked if I'd look over his resume. I said yes and attached edits that began with, "Remove robo-sushi mascot robots." My father wrote nothing at all, but when the documents came back with his signature, it was in his full legal name, legible and deliberate, like a man learning to write left-handed because life had asked him to. We had not saved anything yet. The bank still had to say yes. The losses still had to be absorbed. The therapy would still hurt. But for the first time, the numbers and the love were in the same room without trying to eat each other. The plan existed. The conditions were clear. And my calm didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a backbone. When the meeting ended, I stayed on the call with Elena and Grace for 5 more minutes. "How do you feel?" Grace asked. I looked at the small apartment around me, the chipped counter, the lamp that made night look like morning, the window cracked to let in air thin and merciful. Like I finally asked my life to sit at the table, I said. We set the next steps. Bank submission Friday, signatures notarized Saturday, first therapy session the following week, and I closed my laptop. The room was quiet in the way I dreamed rooms could be. I poured water into a glass and, for once, let myself imagine a future where I didn't have to choose between being the reliable daughter and being a person with a deed to her own name. The plan wouldn't love me back, but it would hold. And this time, so would I. By then, the refinance had gone through. The bank accepted the hardship letter, Elena's footnotes, and Grace's patient spreadsheets. The new mortgage sat on my parents' kitchen counter like a calmer heartbeat, lower rate, longer term, no bridge loan booby traps hiding in the margins. I flew in for the closing and watched my father sign his name without shaking. He didn't crow about it. He didn't pretend he had masterminded the rescue. He just asked the notary, quietly, where to initial next. When it was done, my mother pressed her forehead to the stack of papers like she was saying grace. "Home," she whispered, and I didn't correct her. It was still their home. It just wasn't the altar of someone else's idea anymore. My father surprised me next. He quit the endless overnight shifts and took a job as a fire safety trainer with the county. The first week, he called to tell me he'd taught a class to a warehouse crew and that one of the men had shown him a burn scar from a preventable accident 10 years ago. We went through the exit drills twice, he said, voice steady. 3 times, my mother corrected in the background. He laughed, and it sounded like ash clearing. He started sleeping better. He ate food that wasn't from a gas station. He brought home laminated handouts and showed my mother the diagrams as if they were grandkids' drawings. Therapy didn't turn my parents into different people, but it gave them new sentences. My mother began to say things like, "I didn't see you, and I want to," and my father learned to say, "I don't know," without adding a defense. Sometimes they came home from sessions quiet and puffy-eyed. Once, Mom called me after a particularly rough hour and said, "The therapist asked me when I first learned that praise was scarce." I didn't have an answer. Isn't that something? It was. Raymond changed in the way people change when a wall finally stops them. He landed a help desk job at a cybersecurity company downtown, entry-level, headset, tickets piling up in the queue, and discovered he was good at translating panic into steps. He sent me a photo of his first paycheck and, below it, a screenshot of his automatic transfer into the loan account. On time, the subject line read, like a child bringing home a perfect attendance certificate. He kept it up. Every other Friday, the deposit hit. No drama, no explanations, no mascots. At night, he enrolled in a community college course called Principles of Business, the unglamorous foundation he'd skipped by trying to franchise a dream. On weekends, he phoned me about unit economics and laughed at his own old pitch decks. "Do you know break-even analysis is not a vibe?" he said once, and I laughed so hard I dropped my pen. He still had big ideas, but now they had budgets attached. Every conversation ended with the same 4 words, unprompted, "I'm paying you back." Back in Denver, my days knitted into a pattern I recognized as a life. I took the consulting interview and then the job, joining a team of women who didn't flinch at the word small. Our office was 2 rooms and a coffee cart, but the work felt huge. I sat with a woman who braided hair on her porch and showed her how to separate personal and business accounts so that her tax season wouldn't devour spring. I drew a pricing ladder on a sheet of butcher paper for a baker whose cupcakes were subsidizing her wedding cakes. I helped a house cleaner set aside enough each week to replace her vacuum before it died on a Tuesday. We measured success in invoices paid and weekends reclaimed, not headlines. When clients cried in relief, they often apologized for crying. I kept a box of tissues on the table between the calculators. The editor at the local paper started giving me a monthly column. I wrote about payday loans and the quiet genius of envelope budgeting. I profiled a seamstress who kept 3 families afloat by repairing ski gear for cash in a shed behind her duplex. I reported on the grocery co-op that anchored a block others had written off and the retired accountant who volunteered every Thursday to help undocumented workers file taxes correctly. The pieces weren't viral, they were useful. On Saturdays, if the weather held, I put on my boots and climbed. Sometimes it was just a quick loop close to the city. Sometimes I drove before sunrise and chased a summit that looked impossible at Trailhead and inevitable at Cairn. On one windy afternoon above Treeline, we roped up and crossed a small snowfield. My breath synced to the person behind me. The instructor shouted, "No heroics, just steps." I thought about how that sentence had saved my family and felt my whole body smile. The loan agreement lived quietly in the background. It didn't loom, it held. On the first of each month, I opened the view-only account and checked the ledger. Deposits from Raymond, the line item from my parents' mortgage renewal, auto-pay tick marks like a steady metronome. Elena emailed twice to confirm the therapy attendance logs, not because we were policing, but because momentum likes witnesses. Grace sent a quarterly note, "Boring is beautiful." We believed her. When I flew to Houston in month 4, I found the dining room table naked, no glossy folders, no stage. My mother served food in everyday bowls. My father waited for everyone to sit before eating, something I don't remember him doing when I was a teenager on a schedule. Halfway through dinner, he cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking at me and not the salt. "Not the kind you accept because we're family. The kind I mean." He didn't elaborate or dramatize, he let it sit. I nodded. My mother reached for his hand, and Raymond, who had arrived with a laptop bag instead of a briefcase full of imaginary contracts, grinned at the tablecloth like it was suddenly interesting. The most shocking change was the absence of shock. We fell into ordinary. My parents argued about streaming passwords instead of rescue plans. Raymond asked me to quiz him for a certification exam while Mom cut fruit in the kitchen and Dad read a brochure about fire extinguishers like it was a spy novel. I went to sleep in my old room and woke to the sound of my father making coffee the way he used to when I studied for finals, quiet, careful, hopeful. In Denver, the women I worked with began referring each other. A florist sent in a dog groomer. The dog groomer sent in a mobile mechanic. I built a workshop on cash flow for humans that filled up faster than we had chairs. After one session, a woman in a yellow hoodie waited until everyone left and then said, "I thought I was bad with money. Turns out I was just bad at being alone with it." I told her I knew that feeling in my bones. When I hiked now, I didn't treat the trail like punishment for not being enough. I treated it like proof of forward motion. I kept my dream home fund, but I stopped opening it every time I felt lonely. The balance grew anyway. My apartment grew plants in the windows, and my kitchen learned the smell of cinnamon rolls I brought to early client meetings. On Sundays, I called my mother while I walked to the market. Sometimes my father grabbed the phone and reported the week's training victories, like a teenager who'd finally found a club he liked. Raymond texted me photos, a work ID badge, a stack of community college books, a sticky note on his monitor that read "No pain, no gain." On the 6-month mark, I hiked an easy trail after work and sat on a rock that looked west. The sun threw gold over the foothills. Bikes zipped by on the path below like punctuation marks. I opened my phone. One deposit notification from Raymond, one text from my mother with a photo of my father in a classroom, arms wide as he explained something only he could explain in that exact voice. Beneath it she wrote, "He says teaching is a kind of saving." I believed her. I put the phone away and closed my eyes. The wind tugged at my sleeves, insistent but not unkind. I thought about the girl who once ate a birthday burrito with a tea light in it and the woman who now marked time by payments met and mountains climbed. My parents kept their home and found new roles inside it. My brother found work that respected the part of him that could listen under pressure. I found my place in a city that taught me to breathe at altitude and to trust quiet. We were still us. We were just us with boundaries, which turned out to be another word for care. If I had given in back then, I would have lost both my home and myself. And I don't just mean the roof over my head. I mean the fragile part of me that had fought so hard to stand on my own 2 feet. My savings represented years of missed vacations, nights spent working late, saying no to things I wanted because I was focused on my future. To throw that away for a plan built on illusions would have been the real selfishness toward myself. Now I feel stronger than ever. Not because everything is perfect, but because I finally know where I stand. I can say no without shame. I can set conditions without guilt. And for the first time in my life, my family respects me not as the reliable daughter who will always patch the holes, but as an equal with her own dreams. And now, I want to ask you, have your loved ones ever called you selfish just because you chose yourself? How did you react? Write your own story in the comments below, I promise. Your voice matters here. And if my story touched you, if it reminded you of something you've lived through, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, because somewhere out there right now, someone is sitting at a dinner table, being told they are selfish for daring to dream of their own life. And maybe your words will give them the courage to stand up, just as I finally did.